it really is going to be this powerful enabling factor to like bring in, the next 100 million people to be able to learn to code. So I'm like very, very bullish on that. I wake up every day and it's the fight of our life to make sure that we keep making the product better.
I'm joined today by Logan Kilpatrick from Google DeepMind. He shares the tools we'll need to reach 100 million developers, how Google's AI comeback story happened, and why the next 6 months are going to be more exciting than ever.
People are finally figuring out how to build AI products that people actually like. We sit inside of DeepMind and we benefit from like directly being next to the researchers that train the models. It ends up being like a really human problem. All of these things had to happen to like put us in the place where we can be successful. I'm very optimistic for the future.
You've spoken offline that you want to get to 100 million developers using Google's products.
Yeah, a long way to go to get there.
Yeah. How the hell do you even think about trying to go after such a kind of ambitious goal?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think today where we are, and I mean, for what it's worth, it won't be just us who are doing this. I think like this is an ecosystem wide thing that's going to happen. But I think there's like, depending on who you ask and which charts and data you're looking at, I think there's something like 30 million professional developers today who are actually writing code. And I think there's this, I think that the Twitter narrative or the X narrative is perhaps like split in two. There's like half of people, and I don't know if this is actually true, but from a percentage perspective, but like it seems like half of the world thinks you shouldn't learn to code anymore, just like go prompt and do all this stuff. And the other half is like, you still have to learn to code, et cetera, et cetera. Things will change, but you should still learn. And I'm in the you should still learn to code camp. Not that I think that things will change for sure, but vibe coding and AI and everything that's happening feels like it's this perfect storm of actually taking a lot of the drudgery out of building software and specifically actually learning to code and building software. My mental model has always been, and this is like my firsthand lived experience, so I don't know if this tracks across other people, but part of the challenge of learning to code is just like the really interesting things to be built are on the like tail end of the coding experience. Like when you first learn, like I started to learn to code in C++ and I was like, this is as boring as could possibly be. Like, this is not interesting at all. Like, partially just because of like what we were building in those classes was not cool. I think if I was like C++ programming, like, games in Unity or something like that, which is probably really, really difficult, it might have been cooler, but the entry level stuff is just not fun. And I think vibe coding and all this AI accelerated coding is just like such an interesting way to help like bring the excitement of building stuff, like get to that aha magic moment with coding way faster than you would have traditionally been able to do. And get people through the like things that are hard about coding much faster than they could have before. Like I remember when I was learning to code, I started undergrad in community college, and I would go to the professors, and you would have to like literally find a professor, or you would have to find a tutor, or you would have to like go online and like maybe get lucky that someone else had this problem before and asked it on Stack Overflow and, has an answer that you could actually understand. Or you'd maybe take the step of like asking a question on Stack Overflow and then everyone would yell at you for asking your question in the wrong way or whatever it was. And I lived through that many times. And now you just have like a personal tutor through AI that can just like help you on demand 24 hours a day, sort of reformulate whatever the problem is. I think that's just so cool. And like, I think it really is going to be this powerful enabling factor to like bring in, the next 100 million people to be able to learn to code. So I'm like very, very bullish on that. And I think we'll do our best as well through the Google developer products to like help play a part in that.
Yeah. And I guess like if you're reaching these people that, I guess what we're talking about is, the vibe coders, and it's definitely a different segment. How are you kind of trying to reach these people as well as, core classic developers?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a question and something that our team has been thinking a lot about, because our core product today, AI Studio and the API, have historically been very traditional developer centric. And now we're building a vibe coding product inside of, like many people are doing, inside of AI Studio. specifically to help try to like bring in that next group of people to get them building products and stuff like that. I think the missing link of the experience right now is that most vibe coding products don't they don't do the thing that is actually useful to the learner or to the builder through this outcome of like helping them learn. Like so many, if you look at like what is the outcome that all of the current vibe coding era products are trying to get you to do, the outcome of what they want to do is like build software for you, ideally help you deploy that software, and then hopefully like monetize and like find a way to make money off of doing that process and like having that flow. And I think that's great. And like I think all of those are required attributes of what a vibe coding product or what a software development product could be. But they miss the important factor, which is how can you actually bring people along with you as they're building these complex systems and writing all this code? And how can you do that in like a really incremental way? And you know, here's my personal experience. Like I use V0 all the time. I love V0. I think it's a great product. You know, so shout out to all the folks at Vercel and the V0 team. But a good example of this is when I'm using V0, there's like code flowing across the screen. And I'm like, it's entirely useless. It's not helpful to me at all. Like even as a developer, as someone who studied computer science, as someone who's, you know, ambulance coming by, as somebody who's, you know, deployed software into ChatGPT and, you know, at Apple and now at Google and all these other things, like it is just not useful to see code flying across the screen. And there's so many parts of this like software development process, which I think, or the like vibe coding software creation process, which I think could be optimized to like actually be part of that story of how we're onboarding these users to learn how to code and understand what's happening. And it's just like it's a problem space of like, how do you show the right level of detail and hide the wrong things and all this other stuff. It's like, it is very nuanced. But I'm super interested in this problem space. I think there's so much to be done here. And actually, like there's a similar thing for developer, like even like traditional developers will really benefit from this, which I'm excited about. So it'll be very interesting to see how the next few months goes.
You're making me think of like, if you just get billions and billions of logs and like, it means nothing to you. It's just like basically the same thing, but like you want to be able to just surface like the right amount of abstraction, or like rather than just giving them everything when they don't understand like these, you know, thousands of lines of code that have just been generated, but they may need to understand some specific part of it so that they can debug what went wrong, but knowing that they may not even really know how to code sometimes. And yeah,
there's something here, and I've spent a bunch of time with Amar, who's on my team, who leads design and product, chatting about this. There's some really interesting magical experiences to be unlocked. So I'm excited for us to share more about this.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like audit trails, SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. And if you use them for user management, you get your first million monthly active users for free. I honestly don't know any dev tools that have 1 million monthly active users, apart from GitHub maybe. So that'll get you pretty far. Here's what Kyle from Depot has to say about WorkOS.
We use WorkOS to effectively add all of the SSO and skim to Depot. It's single-handedly like one of the best developer experiences I've ever seen for what is like a super painful problem if you were to go and try to roll that yourself. So for us, we can effectively offer SSO and skim, and it's like 2 clicks of a button, and we don't ever have to think about it. It's like one of the best features that we can add to Depot. It's super affordable, which effectively allows us to like break the SSO tax joke and essentially say like you can have SSO and skim as like an add-on onto your monthly plan. Like it's no problem. So it really allows smaller startups to essentially offer like that enterprise feature without a huge engineering investment behind it. Like it's literally, we can just use a tool behind the scenes. and our life is exponentially easier.
You recently launched Gemini CLI, which I think is, probably like people at the moment maybe know Claude Code a bit more at the moment, but it's like kind of a is this someone at Google's just like I've mentioned Claude Code?
And the lightning strike happens.
Yeah, and also I know there's like the Windsurf. A lot of the Windsurf team just joined Google. How are you thinking about those kind of tools as well?
Yeah, it's super interesting, and like we've also been spending a bunch of time thinking about like what are the core problems that you're trying to solve with like a vibe coding product, for example, which is different than a developer IDE, which is different than like a CLI. And it actually feels like there's a different user persona for all of them. It has been just like to reflect on the success of some of these like CLI tools. It has been really interesting to see how successful they are. My 2 cents as a developer, and I think maybe this is like maybe not like a generational thing, but it just depends on like how you started to code. I was never like a Vim or Emacs person or whatever. Like I use the terminal when I have to run commands like out of functional use, but like I personally find the terminal interfaces to be like a very bad way in order for me to personally develop code. So I've never been like personally like super excited about any of those CLI tools. It just doesn't feel natural to me. It feels like I have way more creative power in an IDE than I would in a CLI. And obviously different people feel differently about this. So it feels like if almost not even worth. Yeah, I've kind of just written off that we'll have both of them because some people like them and some people don't. But yeah, it is really interesting that, so we have Gemini CLI, which is crushing it and doing really, really well. A bunch of folks from the Windsurf team are now part of DeepMind, which is exciting. So it'll be cool to see what they come up with and cook up. And I think also my other reflection was just around like how much, like even like 2 or 3 years ago, it felt like, GitHub Copilot had already just like won the market. There's no reason to do anything else in AI developer tools. The market basically didn't exist, or it had totally been won by GitHub. And then you sort of fast forward to like maybe like 8-9 months ago, and I think the narrative was like, oh, Cursor's won the whole market, and then there's no point in doing anything else. And then now you have all this activity with Windsurf and Cognition, and Cursor is still crushing it. And there's like tons of like AMP code from SourceGraph, and there's like 50 other tools, Klein and, et cetera, et cetera. There's like all of these tools that are doing really, really well. And I think it's actually solidifying in my mind just how big the developer market actually is, and how different the needs of developers are. Like developers are very particular about the tools they use. I think there's a huge market for a lot of these companies to go and build like really useful, successful products. So as someone who loves building developer tools, it's cool to see DeepMind getting as excited as I am about solving these problems for developers.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Logan, because I don't think I met you at the time, but I think you were at the first AI engineers conference, right? You gave a presentation. And I think that there was also, I don't know if you were there, but there was the Copilot presentation, and it was like, I don't know if they were supposed to, but they kind of talked about how they got to like 40 million revenue in like 6 months or something crazy. And it kind of felt like it was like almost like a lap of honor, and like it was like good game everyone else, like this is the best, this is the greatest business ever built, and like they've won. And yeah, it is kind of crazy now when you think of how many things there are. So yeah.
And also Copilot is doing well too, which is what's remarkable to me. Like Copilot is doing well at the same time that like VS Code has built a bunch of AI features into it natively, at the same time that like lots of people are using Cursor and other tools. So I think it's like generally like a really, really cool moment for the ecosystem to see that like level of progress. And like, obviously all of us as developers are like the beneficiaries of it. So I'm like, I love it. Like the competition is great. Hopefully it keeps being, there's lots of stuff being built, because it means I get better tools as a developer, which is awesome.
Yeah. And actually, kind of speaking of Copilot, I know a lot of people that use Copilot because it's the only mandated option at their company. And I know like once you get into like the kind of bigger companies, they're much less like open typically to like trying out the new tools. Like they may not have Cursor even. How much of that like do you think about with like Google obviously has its own like suite of like products and stuff. You already have you're probably sold into like 99% of companies already. Like how do you think about like leveraging that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think some of this is like what do people come to Google for? And I think obviously Google Cloud is a huge business, and like we do sell sort of enterprise infrastructure to lots of people. I do think like there's like tons of very successful products. Like BigQuery is a great example of this. Like very ubiquitously used across the ecosystem. Lots of companies and developers are using it. It does feel like this AI moment is like so competitive that everyone, it's like reset all of the priors for everything that's happening. And I don't know if you're laughing at the lightning in the background or the thunder.
Oh no, I was more laughing just that like, yeah, it's I feel like, yeah, it's very humble. I'm sure it's still I'm sure people still probably feel a little bit safer buying from Google than from a new startup.
No, that's true, but it is there's definitely a customer segment where that's the case, but it's actually I'm glad I got your reaction to that, because like I think there's definitely customers where that's the case, but I think more and more it's become like AI is this frontier problem where everyone is like kind of willing to, or it seems like the mentality has shifted over the last 18 months to be like everyone is like kind of willing to pay a little bit of a tax to and like take on a little bit more risk of being on the frontier at the cost of like sort of disrupting how maybe they procured software in the past, or for example. So I think it's like disrupted a lot of the conventional wisdom about like, just because you're Google and you have lots of distribution doesn't mean that you just get to like win whatever the market is. Like it's a super competitive market across like all dimensions of AI, from the models to the products to the developer tooling, et cetera. I'm reminded of this all the time. Like when I talk to our team, like we need to win across every dimension of the product experience, from how we engage users and support to, how we're showing up in the ecosystem, to like, what are the error messages that are being returned in the API to, how are we making it easy to adopt Gemini models when, people are testing different options in the market. So all of these are dimensions you have to win across. And if you're not laser focus on that, like it's very easy to like get lost in how much stuff is happening in the ecosystem. But I don't wake up any day of the week thinking like, oh, it's, we just get to sit back and and sell Gemini to everyone because we're Google. Like it is I wake up every day and it's the fight of our life to make sure that we keep, not from like a purely competitive standpoint, but just like to make sure that we keep making the product better. And like, that's the North Star. And like, at the end of the day, that will translate into all the things that we care about. But I had an interesting conversation where there's like so much of what people are doing in AI right now is like reactionary to what other people are doing. And that adds this like added level of like FOMO difficulty where like you need to like, oh, our competitor shipped this thing. We have our own roadmap of what we think makes us successful, but like we also need to do what they did to make sure that we don't lose the customers who care about that specific thing. And it is this like really difficult virtuous cycle to break. It makes it tough.
You got to do all the things all the time,
and you can't, and that's the problem. And then you're fundamentally, it is a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah. So how are you doing things at Google? I think last time I interviewed you, you were at OpenAI. I think when you left OpenAI to join Google, I think there was like, people were surprised. I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of surprise because OpenAI was like, still is absolutely crushing it. But I don't think there was that feeling about Google in AI, and a lot of people were kind of, I don't know if to say like negative, but feeling like Google wasn't taking advantage of the advantages that they had. And if we fast forward to like today, it's like I can say like I use Gemini 2.5 Pro a lot. It's the only one that I use that is able to like process like, for instance, like show notes and stuff because of the context is amazing for like whole transcripts of an hour long, and I'll use it for this episode. For Flash is like amazing for like the fast, like 2.0 Flash for like real fast like processing. It's like absolutely brilliant for like voice stuff. The VO3 is just like unbelievable. It's the best video model. It's like Google has, it seems, really stepped things up over the last like 18 months, which I don't know if it's just coincidence that that's when you were there, but what do you think has like changed, if anything has changed?
That is a great question. There's definitely a large degree of coincidence. I am hopeful that I've helped in some way and helped push the rock up the hill. But I think there's a couple dimensions to this. One of them is, and I think this is kind of like an underappreciated reality for Google and maybe just for big companies in general, which is like being organizationally set up to be put into place to be successful is extremely important. And I think if you look at just like how Google was oriented pre-LLM era, like Google was doing a lot of things and was like largely very successful at most of the things that it was doing across search, across, Google Docs, making, a bunch of long-term speculative bets, which have already started to pay off with things like Waymo and others. And, YouTube is now like one of the fastest growing businesses in the world. And Google Cloud's the 8th largest enterprise, or I think now the 6th largest enterprise business in the world. So like for all intents and purposes has done really great work. And further, actually, like AI has been a piece that has underlined a lot of that. So like since, Sundar took over as CEO, like Google's been oriented as an AI company, and like Transformers as a good example have been like powering the Google search experience. And like now today, Gemini is deployed to like over 2 billion users across Google search, which is just like crazy to think about. It's the most widely distributed model and the most widely used AI product in the world. And it's actually principally, which I think is really important to think about. And there's obviously lots of like critics of the Google search AI experience, but it's oftentimes the first entry point that like hundreds of millions of people have to like what this like generative AI product experience can be like. Like despite ChatGPT and other products being like very successful, there's still, hundreds of millions of people have never used those products. And so search acts as like an entryway to sort of get folks familiar. But I do think there's things that like Google was like, slightly behind the curve on. And I think one of those was like, we just organizationally we had like many different teams doing a lot of different stuff. And I think this was back in 2023, Google made the decision to like bring those teams together. And it made sense like as like the LLM area started to materialize in like a really real way. It was like, okay, well, we have lots of different teams doing LLMs. Let's bring them all together and like build a single consolidated team to go and work together and push this up the hill. And that was DeepMind. So historically, we had Google Research, which is doing a lot of this. Google Brain was doing a lot of this, which is where the Transformers came out of. DeepMind was like had the original mission of creating AGI and had done a ton of like the original RL work and other things like that. And I think bringing all of these teams together has actually been what has made it so that we've been able to make this level of progress from a model perspective. So it's been awesome to see. And then like to further that sort of trend, like DeepMind has now also gone from doing just foundational research to building the models and deploying them across Google to now actually also like taking on ownership of some of those product experiences. So our team from a developer perspective, the Gemini API and AI Studio, we sit inside of DeepMind and we benefit from like directly being next to the researchers that train the models. And the Gemini app is also part of that, part of our organization. So it's like the universal assistant to like help everyone accelerate their day, connected to all of your Google stuff, which I think is like a really exciting future for the Gemini app, also sits inside of DeepMind. So they benefit from like the teams that directly train the model. So I think all of these things had to happen to like put us in the place where we can be successful. And it just takes time to like get, many thousands of people, thousands of humans on the same page. Like it is very much like not actually a technology problem. It is like a human problem at the core, which is like so fascinating to think about in this like age where everything feels like a technology problem. It's like actually more often than not, it ends up being like a really human problem.
Yeah. I've heard you say that actually, and I know you're a fan of humans. Like, just,
I'm a fan of humans. I think there's so many good reasons to bet on all that. Like I think there's a lot of existential worry about the future and AI and stuff like that. And I think there is like some amount of it which is warranted, and like it's good to be thoughtful about what the future looks like. But um yeah, there's just so many inherent things about humans that like humans want to interact with and be around other humans. There's no replacement for that. And I'm very optimistic for the future.
yeah.
There's just like so many of these like really incredible leaders across Google who are just like very down to earth, awesome people to be around, and like are actually having fun, which I think in this AI moment, which I think is just like really easy because there's just like so much. It's almost this like exhausting narrative of like how competitive everything is. And really at the end of the day, like this is, it's also supposed to be a little fun. So it's important to like, I'm always reminding myself of that.
I feel like your job sometimes must be like quite hard to be fun because like, you're like often like the very like point of contact. You're like kind of almost like if someone's got an issue, they're gonna like tag you in it and like kind of like
That stuff.
how do you?
Yeah, that stuff is just not that difficult. Like part of I think it's just like so innately in who I am now that like and the historical context is like during undergrad, when I started undergrad, I actually started working at the Apple store. So like I was like 25 hours a week in addition to going to school full time, was working at the Apple store and just like helping people solve their problems. And the Apple store is such a unique and special place. And you just would, and I was actually working at Apple Store in California, so it would be like this huge range of people who would come in and have questions. And I started literally like selling people iPhones, and eventually became like a technical expert and like helping troubleshoot people's problems. And on that side of things, you would have everyone from like someone who literally just like fundamentally didn't actually understand what their phone was doing. And it was like this like foreign magic to them. And they were just like truly lost in the technology, to like literally engineers who were like on the core teams at Apple building whatever the service was, who would come in, and like you would need to be able to like talk to both of these audiences, which I think was like such a profound experience for me. To like just like get many thousands of iterations on goal of like doing those types of interactions. And then now it's just like the reward model in my brain is just like trained to actually to my detriment in some ways, because like a lot of this stuff is not super scalable. I think like X or Twitter like does make it kind of scalable, but like sometimes it ends up being like a bad crutch where like, no, actually like it's probably not the right thing that I'm spending a bunch of time answering people's problems on Twitter and X. Like it's usually the symptom of we have some other problem. And so I do a lot of that reflection as well with like, how do we actually solve the thing that our customers have an issue with, and not just like Band-Aid fix a bunch of problems that people are complaining about. So that's the like challenge that I have now of like finding that balance of like actually answering the person's question versus like how do you take a couple steps back and a couple steps higher up of like broadly solving that problem space and making it easier for customers.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of wild that you've managed to get to this point doing that.
Yeah, it is. It's fun.
It's very impressive. Yeah. Mitchell Hashimoto, the HashiCorp founder, I think also worked at the Apple store when he was young. So maybe
it's a great place. Lots of great people.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, the stuff that you want, I'm sure you are most excited to talk about. What kind of, you tweeted like, I think a couple of weeks ago saying that you think the next 6 months is going to be the most exciting in AI so far. Do you want to give us a bit of a tease of what you think is coming down the line?
Yeah, it's been, there's so many dimensions to this. I think just like generally this this will be true. And there was lots of people who are like, oh, you could say that every 6 months. And like, I think you're right. I think everyone is right about that who is commenting and replying that. I think it's just like worthwhile to like constantly remind yourself this. Cause I do think there's like, you know, it feels like it ebbs and it flows. And like, it's not like this clear, it's not super clear all the time across every domain, but there's a bunch of things getting me excited. One, I think like people are finally figuring out how to build AI products that people actually like. And I think if you look at like the circa, 2023 era building AI products, like the reason, and there's a couple of like maybe notable exceptions to this, like the reason no one built really great AI products during that time was because they just like didn't know what to do. The models were changing so quickly. People were still forming mental models of like, what would a good customer experience around these models look like, et cetera, et cetera. So as a user of these products, like it like takes a long time to build a great product. And I'm excited that like there'll be more and more cool products in the next 6 months that I'll get to benefit from. And like, I think the models are already so good today that you could probably build the thing you want. It's just like, do you have the right context in order to build it? And like, yeah, the models will also get a lot better. I think on the model side, like there's so much, we continue to get these like new dimensions of scaling, which is exciting. Like historically, the way the models would scale was pre-training, and then everyone was asking like, are the scaling laws over? And like now then you could like, we saw probably like a year and a half of like post-training scaling getting better and like lots of stuff happening there. Now you have all the RL stuff that's scaling up, which is really exciting. And like XAI is talking about how they've just like invested everything into RL, that RL stage, and like actually haven't been doing pre-training scaling, which is really interesting. And then actually there's like so I think the reasoning piece had been like the most recent scaling dimension. I think now we're actually seeing this like actually with tool use as well, which like the models are becoming systems themselves and like getting access to more and more hosted tools and different like tool chains, et cetera, which is like this new dimension of scaling, because there's oftentimes like a lot of headroom from the model side as far as like how you train the models to be better at those like complex tool interactions. So I think we'll see that as like, there's like unlimited low hanging fruit there, which is really exciting. So yeah, there's just all of these really unique things that are happening. And like from a building developer, like building on these things or like building developer products, like there's so much excitement about the developer ecosystem, like AI coding tools just continue to work. Like, there's millions and millions of new people coming in using these vibe coding products. Like people are actually able to build businesses around those. Like, Lovable's announcing the fastest path to 100 million ARR, which is awesome. And Bolt's been super successful and all these other. So it's just like, there's so much to be optimistic about. And it feels like all of that acceleration is like incredibly positive, and like very positive sum for the ecosystem. Which is just, yeah, it's really cool to see.
Yeah. And are there any developer tools that you're really excited about outside of like the kind of AI coding tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, and maybe this is too self-serving, but I'm very excited about the Live API that we've been working on for a while. I think there's just something like really, really unique here where we haven't really sort of cracked the nut on how that product experience is going to manifest across all these new products that folks are building. But I really do think there's something special here. For folks who haven't tried this out, we released it back in December. We've continued to make all this progress on better models, better function calling, but essentially like you can talk to the models can see what's on your screen, they can hear what you're saying, and then they can actually do all this like very interesting proactive audio, proactive video, and like take action based on what they see, based on like your system instructions, and all these like really, really interesting use cases. And some of the like early traction that we're seeing with this is around like sort of, for lack of a better word, like co-pilots or like helpers that like help you actually use complex products. So you can imagine like as you go into like Photoshop as an example. There's like 1,000 little buttons everywhere that I'm like, I have no idea what these things do. You can literally just click a button, and this experience doesn't exist in Photoshop. It exists in other products, but you can click a button and just like talk to the model and explain what you're trying to do. And the model also has like vision access, and it can like do things like draw bounding boxes around different buttons or different workflows, and like actually help you use different stuff. And I think there's so many interesting ways to do that, especially for people who are like not deeply technology native. Like I think about this all the time with like, helping my grandma use, different websites. And like, she has a really hard time figuring out like how to navigate through all these different websites. And like, now she can literally just click a button and be like, here's what I'm trying to do. Like, help me accomplish this task. And is such a cool, that's obviously like a very basic use case, but there's so many advanced use cases of this as well, where I think we'll start to feel this like AI co-presence as the live API gets more adoption. So I'm excited to see what people build with it.
That's actually really cool. I can see that being really helpful, especially like with a lot of the time you just don't, like, you're trying to follow a tutorial and there's stuff that happens outside of that context of like, that would be amazing.
I want this for pair programming as well. I think there's something just so magical where like you go back to like, how do we bring in the next 100 million developers? Like every IDE just has a button, and you click the button, and then you have an on-demand 24-hour-a-day pair programmer who can see exactly what's on your screen with your permission, and you can talk to the model, and it can run commands for you. You can do all these things. Like that is not some futuristic like version of that is literally the version of the world that we're living in right now. It's like people just need to build that product experience. So I'm super excited. There's so many interesting things to do.
That would be amazing. And that's a good way to end it as well, I think, Logan, to wrap it up on reaching the next 100 million developers.
Yeah, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we got to do this. Hopefully it'll be sooner than 18 months that we get to chat again. But I appreciate you having me back on, and thanks for everything you do. And this was a fun conversation.
Thank you. And where should it, do you want to send anyone to anywhere? Gemini, I guess.
Go to Gemini, check out AI Studio. You can go to ai.studio or ai.dev. And yeah, if you have questions, if you need anything from our team, please email me, DM me on Twitter, whatever it is, and happy to help answer questions or help people get higher rate limits or scale up or whatever it might be.
Hell yeah. And Logan has a podcast as well.
I do have a podcast, but Jack's podcast is probably better. You should probably watch this and not my podcast. So
go search it. Thanks, Logan. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Logan is an incredibly talented guy. If you enjoyed it, give it a share, give it a rating, or just drop us a message and let us know that you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening.